My name is Clancey I, I'm an alcoholic. The reason I held on the thunderous applause, we have to hurry because there's going to be bingo in here at 10 o'clock, and I don't want to be here talking while we overhear somebody saying, under the 074. I think I enjoy the talks because I identify with it, because they talked about the problems that are indigenous to life, that come with life, and they both, Lewis was talking about being raised in a little town in Oklahoma, a religious town. I was raised in a little town up in Wisconsin in a religious family, in the Norwegian Lutheran Church. Very few people down here have ever heard of the Norwegian Lutheran Church. Down here it's Baptist, Southern Baptist, and things are the elements of strictness. Let me tell you about the Norwegian Lutheran Church. Our dropouts came down here and became Baptist ministers. And I was raised in the church. I didn't think much when I was a little boy. You learned to say, was confirmed and catechized, learned little songs in Norwegian, and these kind of really had the same rules you have in many strong churches. To kids, it seems like if you break a couple of the commandments, you are in danger. If you break 4, you're almost over the hill, and at least it seems that way. I don't know if they're actually saying that. I wasn't really a bad boy, but I just seemed to need more fun than other Lutherans, and so I was breaking a few commandments. By the time I was about 12, I felt pretty sinful. Let me tell you about I haven't thought of this for a long time. I'll tell you about Norwegian Lutherans. They say that Norwegian Lutherans, even if they're married for 30 years, would never make love standing up, just in the fear that some passerby might think they were dancing. It's a tough church. It's a tough church. But I thought about this when I was 12 or so. My parents got a divorce, and that staggered me because I'd never heard of a divorce at 12. I lived in a very protected community. There'd never been a divorce in our family, never one in our church that I ever heard of. And I knew what it was, but I didn't really understand it. And I'd been shoved ahead in school a grade and a half when I was in the third to the end of the fourth grade, so I could read fast, and that was going to give me kind of a challenge. But one time I was 12, I was getting straight A's in school, and I was starting high school, and I was doing well, and my parents got the divorce. I didn't know and I instinctively did the worst thing that anybody can do, although I'd never seen a divorce. But without even knowing about divorce, I instinctively began playing my mother against my father to avoid any structure in my life. And I outsmarted them. When my mother gave me hell, I'd go to my father, and my father gave me hell, I'd go to my mother. They both gave me hell, I'd go to my grandma. And I outsmarted them again and again and again. By the time I was 15, I was flunking out of school. I'd gone from straight A's to flunking out of school, and I didn't have any care for myself or anybody else much. I just felt alone and terrible, and I couldn't imagine why. And what saved me, the war started. And I was 15. After the war had gone a little while, I thought, that's what I need to do, got to get in the war. So I hitchhiked from, I told my mother I was going to Superior, Wisconsin to visit my aunt. She packed my little bag and gave me bus fare. I took that and hitchhiked to San Francisco. Had no idea where the hell I was going. Just looked on the map, and I got a guy give me a ride to Minneapolis, and I stood in the road, and the guy said, where are you going, kid? I said, San Francisco? He said, yeah, hop in. And he was going to San Francisco too. He's in the Navy, going back to the ship. I don't know why he picked me up. He must have been a saint, because he listened to my crap all the way. I was so dumb and pimply and stupid and this big. And at night, there weren't any motels then, so he would stop at trailer courts. He'd get me a bed, and he'd buy my meals, and just take care of me, And got me, I said, I want to go in the Marine Corps and kill Japs. He said, well, you're a little small for that, kid. You might want to get in the Merchant Marine. They're taking anybody now, because all the good sailors gone in the Navy. So we got there, and took me to the Coast Guard office. He said, tell him you're 16, and tell him what you want to do. I think you'll be all right. And he dropped me off and drove away. I wish I knew who he was. I'd certainly hug him a lot. But anyway, I went up there. I said, I want to be in the Merchant Marine. He goes, here's an application. And I filled it out. I put down 16. He said, well, you're only 16, kid. We need your parents' permission. So I took it around the block, got my parents' permission. And they issued me Siemens papers right there that day. And the guy sent me to the National Maritime Union. The guy took me down there, and they had me sign a waiver for my union dues. I didn't know what waivers were or union dues. But and took another guy over to the Embarcadero. We put us on a big ship, and 15 minutes later, we were on our way to the South Pacific. And it really was fun for about an hour. That's where the World's Fair was last year. Mm-hmm. That's Alcatraz. That's the Golden Gate Bridge. But the damn ship just kept going, you know. And some guy said, "Get to your forecastle." I didn't know what a forecastle was, but it sounded ominous to me, I'll tell you. I went in there, of course, all it is where the crew sleeps on a ship. And I was stuck in a room with three of the worst type of people that any small, skinny, pimply-faced, dumb kid can be with. And these people are called men. And they said, "What the hell are you supposed to be?" I guess I was the fourth person on their four-man watch, and they realized they were not going to get much work out of me, and they just felt bad. But I didn't know that. I saw there was a little tension in the air, so I told them a joke or two that I was used to go over good in study hall. Didn't go over there. "Why you in your bunk? Dummy up." I got my bunk, and it was the upper bunk, and the ship was going around. It was hot in there. And I just felt terrible. What I really wanted was my mother. But I didn't want to say anything and ruin my image. And these guys started talking, and I was shocked out of my wits. I thought I'd had a full life, but I was just a dumb kid, protected. And these guys had been in port for 3 or 4 days, and they had been doing dirty things. I tell you, I said to myself, "Of course. They've all got black hair. These must be the Catholics I've heard about." You know, I don't want to give the wrong impression, like our friend Lewis said. Even at the age of 15, I'd had sex, but I'd been apprehensive, and I'd been afraid, and I'd been alone. And these guys were doing things. They were doing it with people, if you can believe it. Oh, just terrible. And I never felt any worse in my life, I don't believe in. But eventually, after 3 or 4 days, I found a niche on that ship. Finally, I roll. I became kind of the ship fool. You know, "Hey, kid, go down to the engine room. Tell them we need a left-handed wrench." "Hey, kid, go up on the bridge. Tell the captain we need some elbow grease." And these guys would sit around at the end of the watch every afternoon, and they all had whiskey in their sea bags. They weren't supposed to, but they did. And I found that appalling. And they'd sit and drink and tell stories and laugh. Oh. And one day one of these guys turned to me and said, "How about you, Junior? You think you're man enough for a little snort?" And I may be stupid, but I'm not bad. I'm just shocked. I could feel my pimples stand up just. And I was preparing a statement to demolish him. I was going to say, "You big dummy, you put that whiskey out of my face. I'm not one of you Catholics. I'm a Norwegian Lutheran, and we don't drink whiskey, and we don't run around with people that do, and I have to stay here, but I don't want to stay here, and I think it's just terrible. Don't ever do that to me again." I was just about to tell him that, and he said, "Why do you think you're man enough?" And I heard the voice say, "Goddamn right." I had my first drink of whiskey out of the first bottle I was ever close to in my whole life. And it took it and burned my mouth and my stomach and my throat, and then it burned my stomach and my throat and my mouth, and his shirt finally. "Get the bottle away from the little son of a bitch." To this day, I don't know any emotion that's worse than public humiliation, where you're just humiliated. There's nothing you could do. I didn't dare hit him. If I could see why people would take guns and shoot people. I thought later there was one thing I might have done. I'm glad I didn't think of it. They might have thrown me overboard. It would have been cute, though. Say, "Lean over, you." "Yeah, take that." Just give money. But all the way across the Central Pacific, when nobody was around, at least once a day, I took a drink and step out of that crap, and I hated it, and I'd throw it up, and I'd have to wipe it up. But I wanted so desperately for those guys to think I was a man, and I really wasn't at all. Nothing I could have done, but I didn't know that. And just terrible. I hated it. And the night we started to come into Pearl Harbor. You know, I saw that movie Pearl Harbor a few months ago. The love story was a little offbeat, but I mean, that's the way it looked. That's just exactly the way it looked. And it was the night before my 16th birthday, and everybody's up on deck looking, and I was down there taking a drink of that crap again. And it stayed down. First oh God, I couldn't breathe. And, just terrible. And all of a sudden something strange happened. I found myself feeling significantly better. And I realized why people drink whiskey. I've always envied people in AA who have great insights. I don't have many insights, but I heard a guy speak a few years ago. He said, when I held that first drink of whiskey down, I knew I'd gone into a new garden of experience, a garden with many flowers and fruits to be savored in the coming years, until it was necessary for me to leave that garden and come to this wonderful program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I thought, I wish I'd known that. All I learned was, if you don't puke and you can breathe, it makes you feel better. That's what I learned. I didn't think anything about it. When you're teens or when you learn things, you don't have to think, it's a big breakthrough. Just whiskey makes you feel good. Nobody in my family smoked. Everybody in that ship smoked, so I smoked at the same time. Smoked and puked and smoked and puked. So one day I smoked and didn't puke, and I smoked 2.5 or 3 packs a day every day for the next 40-some years. Till I realized it was making me bald. I learned to lust effectively by listening to these guys. I'd never done that, and I found techniques that worked for them, never worked for me, but I knew what they were. I could make my moves and be rejected and sent home. I think it's no big deal. I got on another ship finally, went up to the Aleutian Islands, where some of you don't remember this, but in the Second World War, the Japanese invaded the Aleutian Islands, took some islands, and we had to get them out of there. When I was 17, I went in the Navy. I spent some time in the Navy, and at the end of the war, I was in a naval hospital up in Northern California being sewed together, and they passed around a bunch of tests. I must have been good on tests, so they brought me back from the Armed Forces Institute, a high school diploma. I'm still a junior in high school. And I went back to college after the war and went back to Wisconsin, went to the first class of veterans in 1946, and really, most of you aren't old enough to remember that. Few of you are, but it's the only time in history where millions of people all got out of the service at once. They all had the GI Bill. A lot of them went to college just for something to do, just because you get paid for it, they pay your tuition. And you'd sit in freshman, they'd rented buildings and just jammed. You'd sit in freshman English class, be some old 45-year-old hard-bitten sergeant sitting in the front row. Yeah, next to some little honey just out of Plum Run High School or something. Were you in the war? Yeah, you put out? Very rude questions, but a lot of them did. I went through college. I did fairly well. I won some trophies for the university. I met a girl in college that had black hair, black flashing eyes, romantic, just nothing. I'd never seen anything like that in our church. I'll tell you, and she won my heart. Then she dropped the big one on me. She said, I'm a Catholic. I can't take you home. What can I do with you? But I struggled the net, but she won me. We got married, and I went out in the world. I became a sports writer, newspaper sports writer, which to this day is my favorite job I ever had, covering football and baseball. And then my wife began manifesting the terrible behavior patterns of Catholics that I knew nothing about, and I never knew anybody who knew anything about it. But Catholics know about it, I guess. But I'll tell you this, if you're thinking about marrying a Catholic, prepare yourself to have a big family. I started my second career then as a national distributor of small Catholics. So I had to get better jobs. I had to get better jobs to get more money coming in to support this woman's habit. And I got into advertising and advertising agencies and corporations. I worked around the country. I was a pretty good writer, and I'd have emotional explosions. And everything was fine. I did all the things, smoking and drinking and lusting effectively. The only problem is I have a tendency sometimes to drink too much. Or as I prefer to believe, I have many times been thoughtlessly overserved. And when I overdrink too much, I have a tendency to act bizarrely. And in psychoanalysis years later, the psychoanalyst pointed out to me that I had been so repressed as a child that this was kind of a compensatory device of breaking loose, I suppose. And I liked it. And so someone said there's a new thing in town called Alcoholics Anonymous. Maybe you'd like to go to it. Some of the old drunks in town are cutting down. So I went to it, and I was 22, same age Kay was when she went to A. And I was appalled. A bunch of old boobs in the room, about their late 30s and 40s, and sitting around a table. It looked like God's waiting room. Jesus, what is it? And I went to some of their meetings, and they sat around. I don't know if maybe you heard this too, but it's things like, when I drink, it's just terrible. But I get sober and everything is fine. My family and I are happy. Then I drink again, and then it goes to hell. Then I get sober again, it's very wonderful. And then I get drunk again, and then it goes to hell. And, Jesus, why do you do it, you goof, And I don't know, I heard one speaker, I don't know what he said, but I was stuck in my mind. What he said was, I stayed drunk around the clock for 25 years. One day I walked through that door. They told me to put the plug in the jug, and I did. And I've just never been so goddamn happy. So I went to work for Fairbanks Morrison, a different city, and the heat was on a little bit, so I went back to AA for a little while. I thought maybe it would be different here, but it's the same crap always, the same old 12 steps, turn over to God, and those goofy traditions would make no sense whatever. And for the next few years, I went to AA from time to time when the heat was on, because it was AA was not very well known then, and you could kind of go on the mystique. Mr. Collins, I'm going back to Alcoholics Anonymous. I think they've got a wonderful program. Maybe, yes, if you could just get on squared away, it'll be fine. And you go home and tell your wife, well, Charlotte, I've gone back to A&A, and it's going to be better. She said, oh, wonderful. Maybe it'll really do for you. What do they want you to do, honey? They want me to taper off. And there wasn't any Al-Anon then to screw it up for everybody. Ever since they started that damn Al-Anon, there's never been a moment's rest for everybody. No, you have to say that. We know that, but I forgive you, you son of a bitch. I went to psychoanalysis because all my life I know I've had certain problems that other people don't seem to understand. As far as I could determine, there's something missing in me, and I don't know what it is. But other people seem to recognize it when they get close to me. There's something missing in this guy. And I don't seem to get along with people well, and I don't seem to fit in very well with people very long. I have a hard time sustaining one-to-one relationships. I feel less than a lot of the time, and it makes me resentful. And sometimes I work myself in a position where I'm superior to people. And when less than, I resent them. When I'm superior to them, I have contempt for them. The other thing I never feel equal to anybody. My life has just been a series of emotions, and I wanted to do something about it. I thought maybe psychoanalysis. I spent several $1,000s. I know one of our speakers here is from Milwaukee. I went to a psychoanalyst in Milwaukee on Milwaukee Avenue, Wisconsin Avenue. Spent a lot of money there, and I found out various reasons that seemed good to me why I have these emotions. Because I was raised in depression. I'd been deprived as a child. Didn't even know that, but when I found it out, I could see it. That's where I found I'd been repressed by the Norwegian Lutheran Church. If I knew then what I know now, I would have formed adult children of Norwegian Lutherans. We could have got together once a week, hired a couple codependents, and just been pissed off all the time. I discovered I'd been hurt by going away to sea too early. That might be true there, I don't know, but my parents divorced, but a lot of things. And I used to come out of there and just think, Jesus, no wonder I have these emotional storms. My life has just been chaotic. I've just been billeted from pillar to post. And it took me almost a year to really realize, I know why I have these emotions. But suddenly I realized I still have them. I didn't get rid of them, I just know why I got them. About the only use for that information that I ever found was maybe late at night in a bar, some big moose came over and said, I've been hearing you mouth off all night. What the hell's wrong with you? And you can tell him. I was repressed by the Norwegian Lutheran Church. I read books. Because one thing Lewis was talking about, I don't want to quote you all night, Lewis. Your talk wasn't that good. Can't have the Saturday night speaker quoting a Saturday afternoon mornings. Anyway, but he talked about the inherent carryover being taught as a child, and I believe that. And I think that's the thing Hitler used to say, you give me their minds till they're 12 and they'll be Nazis till they die. Some of them down deep. That's the way I felt with my religion, with my God. God, I could talk and discuss God and laugh at it, ridicule it, but at 2 o'clock in the morning, every so while, I just knew I'm going to go to hell, and there's no way out of that. I did a lot of reading. I stumbled onto a guy named Nietzsche, which was Friedrich Nietzsche. I just loved him because he was a cynical, nasty guy, and I liked what he said. And I read too far. I discovered he died in the insane asylum. I went back and discovered he wasn't really insane. He just had syphilis. He's a good-time guy, like you and me. But one of his works, one of his protagonists says, "Why are you afraid of God? God is dead. Perhaps he once existed to set the orbs of the world or some spirit of that. But look about you now. There's chaos except for natural law. There's no God. God is dead." I remember reading that thinking, now that's some good news. Because if God is dead, I won't go to hell. I may just go nowhere. I'm not going to go to hell. And in fact, in Chicago, there's a very famous board in a theological seminary. It says, "God is dead." Signed Friedrich Wilhelm Nietzsche, 1884. Unfortunately, beneath it says, "Nietzsche's dead, signed God, 1907. Because of my emotions and my drinking, what I used to assuage my emotions, and I went up and down. Sometimes I'd lose a job and get in a beef with this, that. But I went to different cities. Now I started over again, and all of my children, all 6 of them, represent a reconciliation in a new city where it's going to be different, and it's just on and on. And I went up and down, up and down. I was bounced up and down. And I went down once and didn't come back up. But I couldn't believe it. It was in Dallas. In Dallas, and I was working for Tracy Locke, the largest advertising agency in the South. At that time, I was working on the Elsie and Elmer ads for the Borden Company. And I went down, and I got fired. And apparently, they'd talked to my wife for about a week, about this for about a week. At that time, her name was Poor Charlotte. And they said, "We're going to have to let him go. You better make some plans." And so she did. The day I got let go, she took the kids and left town and sold the furniture. I was off a little drunk for a couple of days, got home. And there was no furniture, no family. My clothes were in a pile of clothes. The company repossessed my car. And I went from being a pretty sharp guy to standing on a street corner in Dallas. And I knew that she probably had turned me back into that nut house where I was on kind of probation from. So I knew how to get out of there. So I quick got a drive-away car out of that state to Los Angeles. That was the only one available. So I started to go to Los Angeles. I got to El Paso, where I'd been in the faculty of the university there for a while. And met some old friends, got drunk in Juarez, had a good time, and the next day I got as far as Phoenix and lost the damn car. I parked it, I never found it yet. It's all my clothes were in it and everything, and I got in a beef on the street corner. Some guy turned out to be a cop, and he threw me in jail overnight, and in the middle of the night I was so sick and coming up drunk, and I got up and I vomited. It turned out to be a guy's bunk. He wasn't in it, but he was just... Maybe so for good. I laid down next to him, went to sleep, and he came back and found an old drunk next to his bunk, and he said, "You drunken bastard!" And he kicked my front teeth out. And that was one of the few mornings I was glad I'd been in psychoanalysis, because I was almost instantly able to identify his problem. I remember thinking to myself, this son of a bitch is overreacting. But I didn't want to say anything and make trouble. The next morning I got out of that jail, and God, I was just sick. I didn't know anybody in town. It was 120 degrees. And I'd been going to AA off and on over the years. Every time I went to AA, I'd give somebody a few bucks, some newcomer could smirk. And I thought, I better get some money. I found an AA club over there, the Arid Club. I didn't know what it was. And I found an old lady. She said, "Are you sick, young man?" "Oh, I put on my newcomer look." I said, "Yes, I really am. I want to find the program, but they need $20 at the 12th Step House. I don't have $20. She said, "Well, I'll give you that." I said, "Thank you, ma'am." And I made a run for the Greyhound Depot and got out of there and got to Los Angeles. And there was a guy in Los Angeles. I'd given him a start. He was a big star now, and I went to KFWB, and I said, "I've had a terrible car accident, and I've lost everything. I got my teeth knocked out, lost my clothes. Can you let me have a few bucks?" He gave me a lot of money. So I'd given him a start years before. And he said, "Sure, let me know if there's anything I can do." And I had him 3 or 4 or 5 days, just a little drunk around town. One day, some guy take me to an AA club. He said, "You need AA," so I took me to AA club, and I denounced them and wandered off and had a wonderful time. It started to rain. I ran out of money, and I called him up again. I said, "Geez, my money hasn't come yet, but I need a few more bucks." He said, "I called Dallas. You haven't had a car accident. You're a bum. You're a bum. Stay away from the station." He said, "Jesus, I need a few bucks." He said, "Come to the back of the station tonight. I'm on the night tonight. Come to the alleys. They're on Hollywood Boulevard. Their back is to an alley." And I went out there, and he came out on the fire escape. He said, "Clancy, stay away from the station." And he threw a $5 bill down, and it went to a mud puddle, and I crawled out and got it. I think of all the things I ever did that ever made me shudder, that's the worst thing I ever did. Worse than all of them. And a couple of days later, I found myself being thrown out of a Skid Row mission. Two big guys thrown me out and said, "And stay out of here, you troublemaker." Now, I tried to explain to them, I'm not a troublemaker. 3 years ago, I was on the faculty of the University of Texas. Ads that I wrote were running that very week in Life and Time and Saturday Post, the New Yorker. I've had my picture in the New York Times for one of my achievements. How many people do you know have had their picture in the New York Times? But it's hard to explain these things in midair. I stood outside that damn old mission that morning, and it was cold and raining, and I had a terrible feeling. I didn't know what it was. I know what it is now because I've seen it in other people. But the feeling that you get to a point where there is no friendly direction. There's no place to go back to. There's no place, nobody cares. And I just felt so terrible. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't believe what was happening to me. If someone got up to me that morning and said, Slim, you're dying. You're down to 120-some pounds. You've lost your wife and children. You'll never see them again. You've lost your career. Once upon a time they called you a boy genius. Now you can't even get a job washing dishes. Even if you could get a job, you weren't going to get it because your mouth is blood, no teeth. You're just a bum. You're an only child, and your mother up in Wisconsin is not allowed to accept phone calls from you anymore because your stepfather's so tired of watching you manipulate her, so she'll go to her tiny bank account and take out a few more dollars and send them to you, hoping it'll make you better. You'd rather have her think you're dead than the way you are. You have no clothes except what you got on, torn suit, dirty shirt. You've been going to AA now for a lot of years. You've been smirking and laughing at these people. For God's sakes, why don't you go back to AA one more time if you'd have said this and admit you're an alcoholic and see what happens. And if somebody had said that to me, and if I were in a mood to be honest, I'd have to tell him, pal, you don't understand. My problem is I'm not an alcoholic. I wish I were an alcoholic. It would make it so much better, but I'm not. And if he had said, well, prove you're not an alcoholic, I wouldn't have been able to do that. I wouldn't have had the objectivity to stand back and delineate the differences. So I probably would have had to do what people like me do, and I'm sure a lot of people in this room, when you get frightened and cornered, and you take refuge behind bluster, to say things like, oh, get out of my face, you son of a bitch. Leave me alone. Get away from me. Because I'm afraid and I don't know what to do. And but I knew I wasn't an alcoholic. I now know why I wasn't an alcoholic then, and it's very simple, because I'd been in and out of AA for years, and I didn't learn how to stay sober. I learned what an alcoholic was with these boobs, and that's very simple. So that if you're kind of new tonight, you may wonder, well, what's an alcoholic? Everybody knows what an alcoholic is. Kay was talking about that. Everybody knows what an alcoholic is. There are people who drink too much, and they get in trouble drinking. And they come to AA, if the ones that come to AA, straight clean up their act, and after that they feel better. If you go to a speaker meeting in your home community, for the next year you'll hear 52 speakers with different backgrounds and different stories and different experiences and different ideas. But one thing they will all have in common, underlying, will be the underlying theme. I used to drink and my life was bad. I came to AA and did these things, and now I'm better. That's always there. And part of that I could go for. I could talk about drinking, because I've got a lot of drinking stories. Now I'm a bizarre drinker, kind of. And I've been in jail a lot, 32 times, just overnight, but it's still good for an advertising executive, I have a tendency when I get drunk to counsel police officers. Sometimes step in to prevent an unjust arrest and go in their place. And I've been in hospitals and veterans hospitals briefly, in Texas State in that house, a lot of places, and I can talk drinking stories with anybody. And I can talk, I've been to AA, you want to know about AA in New York? Tell you about that. AA in Chicago, anyway, in Minneapolis, Milwaukee, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Dallas, El Paso. I've been in a lot of places, AA. I can talk to you about regional peculiarities. But the one thing I could never overcome is this, deep in my heart. The reason I can't be an alcoholic is this. It is when I get sober and clean up my act, that is when my life gets painful. And the longer I go, the worse it gets. And I go to these people, hear these people in meetings talking about how it's getting better because they've stopped drinking, and I just know there's something deeper. And they read that thing in chapter 5 about grave emotional problems, and I know just who they're talking about. And I wish I were an alcoholic, and I could stop drinking for a while, but what happens to me, it almost seems that after a while, sometimes after one day, sometimes after 2 weeks, somebody sneaks into my bedroom in the middle of the night and puts an invisible spring in my gut. And the next day they start to tighten it. And then comes the onset of the restlessness. And the dismay that people treat me like I'm some kind of a child. And you mean my gardener can drink and I can't drink? It's not the drinking, and you don't understand. It's the other problems. I'm cursed with the ability to think that you people obviously are, because I can see. And I know that 2 or 3 drinks will stop that feeling. That's the only thing I've ever found that does. And sooner or later, I take a drink. Now, sometimes you have to stop drinking when the heat is on. When you're young, sometimes you go on the wagon and say, "Well, I'm drinking a little too much. I'm gonna stop drinking." Hell with it, and you do for a while. And it starts to get irritable. You have a few drinks. Yeah, sure, I show you. But I'll tell you something else. If you get older and you keep drinking, now when you get sober, you got to start making promises to people. You got to promise your employer. You got to promise your wife. You got to promise your children. You got to promise some judge somewhere. You got to promise God. And now you get irritable and cross, and you can't drink. And now it's just ridiculous. I heard a guy speak when I was a couple of years sober that described that phenomenon exactly. I'd never heard it described like that before or since, and I believe it to be true in my case. He said that when he got in that situation, without being aware of it, he would set up a beef with the person he had promised. And I've done that with my wife, for example, several times. Okay, I've stopped drinking, I've tried to do the right thing, and you never let up with that damn mouth of yours, and nothing I ever do is enough. For Christ's sake, why even try to stop drinking for someone like you? I never once realized that I set it up. Think I'm a victim. Victim, always a victim. But nobody came up and talked to me that morning. I just stood in the street corner in the rain. And I thought, I got to get off the street corner. I thought, I'd been to the AA club at the corner of Wilshire and Fairfax, wherever the hell that was. I said, where's that? Some guy, he said, well, Wilshire doesn't all come down the way down here to Los Angeles Street, after this hill, to Hill Street, and then cover to Wilshire and go west. And I did that. I walked in the rain and walked and walked. My mouth was bleeding and hurting. I felt bad. Years later, I counted my car. That's 72 long blocks. That's a long walk when you're sick and desperate. A woman asked me in New York one time, how could you possibly walk that far when you were so sick and desperate? The answer is simple. That's the only time you can. You could do it no other time. But nobody's helping. You got to do what you got to do. And I got to that club, and they remembered me from having been in there and counseling them. And they were glad to see me, and I was glad to see them, and I lurked around all day. And at night they had a meeting. I had about 4 pounds of cake, which I could eat with my bleeding gums. And then somebody talked about gratitude. I almost puked it up against this. Everybody went home, and the manager there, I better get my newcomer look here. I said, I have no place to sleep, sir. I'm a newcomer, and I want sobriety, but I have no place to go, and it's raining. He said, you're in luck, kid. A guy named Joe Quinn left an old 49 Merc in the parking lot last summer. It's that tall grass on the end. It's dry. It doesn't run, but it's dry. You want me to sleep in an abandoned car? I said, yeah, good deal, huh? Thank you very much. And I slept in that car that night, and it was cold and sick. I got in the morning, it was Sunday morning, and went in the club. They were having some spiritual meeting, and I ate more cake, and they talked about God or Jesus or somebody I didn't want to hear about. And that afternoon, I lurked around the club, and that night they went to another meeting, and that night I slept in an abandoned car. It kept raining. The next morning it was raining. Went in the club. This went on for days. I remember thinking, maybe I'm dead. Maybe my grandmother was right. This is what happens when you marry a Catholic. Hell is not really fire. It's cold and wet. And every day someone talks to you about the 12 steps. And I had no idea then or thereafter that would be my sobriety date. Because of all the times I ever wanted to get sober, that's the least time. I didn't want to stay sober there at all. Because all of us is just endless pain. I know sometimes new people think, with zeal, if you really want to stop bad enough, you can. And that's true. I did once. I was in jail one night, and just overnight. Next morning, they came down to get me out. There's no big deal, but they said, you should have been home last night because your little boy died and we couldn't find you anywhere. And I thought, oh, Jesus. Because I had a bunch of little girls and one little boy, and he became object of my eye. And I felt so bad about that, I couldn't stand it. And remember that weekend on Sunday, sitting around this living room with my brother-in-laws, two brothers-in-law, and my father-in-law, and nobody said an unkind word. We never mentioned the jail. Clancey, you want some more coffee? Can I get you a cup? And but in their eyes, you could just see, you dirty bastard. You dirty, look what you've done to our sister, you dirty bastard. But nobody said an unkind word. The next day there was a funeral. I put my hands in his casket. Nobody's looking. I said, John Immislund, this will never happen again. I promise you with my life. And I went back to work. I was working at El Paso then. And I had a very sad feeling about my son, but I had a sense of elation. He didn't die in vain. I died so that his wife, or his mother, and his sisters and I could live a better life. It took that much to jar me. And I felt so good. But I prayed for him every night. I prayed, not that he needed my prayers. I'm sure God accepted him, and he might have hated me, but God accepted him. And you can stop. Except one night, somebody snuck into my bedroom in the middle of the night and put an invisible spring in my gut. The next morning I got up and it started. And now it's got a little bit worse. And now, together with everything else, I had a self-pity. Why would this stinking damn God take the one thing I love to punish me? Why kill my son to punish me, for Christ's sake? I'm so tired of this crap. And it got bad. The job I liked, I didn't like. And my daughters, I was doing it for, and their noise made me crazy. Mary, take your sisters and go to your room. Let Daddy alone. We'll play tomorrow. Jesus, I'd hate myself for doing it, but and if I just have 2 or 3 drinks, I could ease off. But we made a promise to your dead son, you can't drink. And one morning, my wife took the kids to Mass, and I pulled the car in the garage, hooked up the hose to the exhaust pipe, just crazy, turned the motor and went to sleep and died. And a neighbor looking out the window saw me go in there. He's having some coffee at the kitchen table, heard the motor running. I didn't come out. And he finally ambled over to see if I was all right. Found me dead in the car. And they put me out and beat my chest and whizzed my mouth and rushed me to the hospital and oxygenated me and examined me and studied me and determined I was seriously mentally ill and committed me to the Texas State Insane Asylum. And nothing on my commitment paper said alcohol, because I'd been sober a while. It said schizophrenia, paranoid tendencies, I guess. Now that's how I get when I stop drinking very long, when it's too bad. Now you can't call that a drinking problem. Drinking is the answer, and sometimes it gets out of hand. But how do you explain that to anybody? My problem is not alcohol. And why in the world would I stay sober this time, the least time? I've often thought about that. Let me tell you, every January, the North York group in Toronto, Canada, has me come to Toronto in January to, prepare yourself for this exciting concept. A day with Clancey I. It tells you all you need to know that I'm going to Toronto in January. The good speakers are speaking in Florida and Texas and Louisiana. In the morning, they have a local speaker at 9 o'clock, and I talk at 10:30 or so on the steps of the traditions of the history of AA. In the afternoon, they have a question and answer meeting where the big celebrity answers questions for the little people. And sometimes I can't think of the answers right away. Sometimes my answers get a little long. It takes a while, but I get to them. And at night, there's another local speaker, and then there's a dinner, and then I speak at night, the regulars talk. And a few years ago, some woman in the back said, Clancey, I have a question, but if you don't mind, I wouldn't like one of your long answers. I thought to myself, somebody ought to slap that bitch. But I didn't say anything because I'm too nice a guy. I said, yes, she is. Every year you come up here and talk. You slept forever, you lost everything, you're just terrible. Now you've been sober forever, everything you touch turns to gold. What made the difference? Why don't you just tell us what made the difference? Could you do it in a sentence or two? I thought to myself, no, but if you come up here, I'll snatch your bald, you old bag. I said, there really is no way to do that in a sentence or two, ma'am. I'm very sorry. Perhaps I could talk to you individually about it, but it's quite a complex situation, I guess. But she really threw off my rhythm that day. It just made me crazy. Not that I was taking a shower before I talked, and the answer came. An answer came that I could have given her. But I probably wouldn't have because it was such a nothing answer. I think newcomers deserve answers with a little panache, with a little zip. If there are newcomers here tonight, I hope they leave here saying things like, did you hear what Clancey said? Wet birds don't fly at night. Did you hear what Clancey said? Never mind if the horse is blind, keep loading the wagon. Now these answers mean nothing, but they give the newcomer hope. The answer I thought of was such a pedestrian, nothing little thing. Because this is the first time I ever felt so bad that I did things around AA meetings that were demeaning and made me feel sick to my stomach. You know, demeaning, nasty little... I'm not talking about even as low far down as steps. You know, just terrible things. Like, for example, I'd sit in those meetings in that club. I had to go to the meetings and throw me out of the club, I guess. I'd sit in the front row. And they didn't have any... They hadn't invented styrofoam cups yet. So everybody drank out of porcelain cups. At the end of the meeting, somebody had to wash them. The old timers got sick of washing them. I was looking for some new stooge. You know, come over, the guy said, you there, boy, out the front teeth, you want to wash our cups tonight? If I had any strength left, I'd have said, no. I don't want to wash cups tonight or tomorrow night or any other night. Why didn't you lick them off with that long, ugly tongue of yours? But I was in such a delicate situation, I had to say. Another night, the guy said, we need somebody to stay awake and mop. Can you do that, kid? No, the worst of all, what that guy says, we need somebody to help set up the chairs tomorrow night. How about you, kid? You live right here on the property. Should be easy for you. It's just hell. It's just terrible. And somehow I stayed sober 2 days or 2 weeks. I guess about 2 weeks. So I was just like living in a horror story. Somebody would buy me a sandwich once in a while, or somebody would buy me a donut I could eat. And the only thing wrong with that club is full of AA fanatics. And no matter who you were, if you stayed sober 2 weeks, they'd start on you. You know, got a sponsor yet? Time to get a sponsor. Better get a sponsor. I'd had a lot of sponsors over the years, people that I thought could help me in my life. And I'll tell you, if you're new tonight, watch out for these sponsors. They all pretend to be so nice and helpful, but sooner or later they all want to stick their nose in your business. I didn't want any sponsors, but I used to see this movie actor, come in out of the club, and I'd seen him in movies. He just played character actor parts, but the parts I'd seen him in, he gave people money and helped him out and did things like that. That's my new sponsor. He wasn't quite 2 years sober, so I knew I had him. You know, he's a dummy newcomer. I said, Bob, I'm a new man, and you're such a good example of AA. Would you be my sponsor? I said, sure, kid, but once you do it, I tell you. Oh, sure, Bob. I want sobriety on an all-time basis. They like to hear that. I look back now and I think that guy should have won the Academy Award for every loving role he ever played anywhere, because they were foreign to his nature. He turned out to be a right-wing fascist AA pig of the worst sort. Just, do this, now do this, do this. I felt like Quasimodo. Look, Bob, I'm ringing the big bell. And I've thought many, many times, why would I take that crap from that guy? Because at that stage of my life, I didn't take crap from anybody. I was very defiant and had been for some time. I've left big jobs that people would die to get because somebody gave you too much crap. Get yourself another boy, pal. Adios. And I really had a resistance. And again, I was sober a while. I heard somebody talk about that. I guess maybe they talked about it before, but I never heard about it. But a guy was talking about, and I could see how that was me. And I understood why I was so defiant. And do you know why? Because in those years of my life, it became quite clear to me that inside I am a weakling. And I hate weaklings, and I hate myself worst of all. I'm a weakling. Other men have manly emotions, and I have worms. I'm afraid, I don't fit in, people won't like me. And I can't stand it, so the defense against that is never show anything, and no show any weakness anytime. I don't know how many, I'm not going to take any crap from anybody. I don't know how many nights in bars, the guy comes over and says, Sid, you don't look very much to me, kid, you mouth off a lot. You don't think I'm very much? Why don't you try me, son of a bitch, and see how I am? And I get knocked on my can a lot. But they know I'm half crazy, and they know I'm half tough, I guess. I guess you along in bars. Now, why would I take this crap from this guy? And I suppose it gets down to the root of what Alcoholics Anonymous is about. Now, I found out later, like our other speakers have said, my sponsor didn't like me very well because I was a smart aleck. There's nothing in the world to this day that I know that's worse than a smart aleck loser. Jesus, you try to tell them things, I don't need, you're quoting that wrong out of the book. Okay. And they send a lot of them to me now. God is punishing me. But anyway, he would try to help me, and he took me a couple times to hear him talk, and he would try to talk to me, but I tried not to. The bad thing about that resistance thing also is that when you go to AA, you don't hear anything, because if you follow any advice in AA, it indicates you're weak, and you can't do that, so you can't do that. But I heard him talk a couple times, and I heard him talk saying things. I must have heard it in AA if I went to meetings for all those years, but I never paid attention to what people were saying. I thought they were all a pain in the ass. But he was talking about how he never felt his problem was really alcohol. So he couldn't be these emotions were so severe. He felt he didn't fit in, he had inadequate, feeling different. He had to become something to prove to people, on. And he found that drinking is what eased it off, and now drinking is a problem, there's nowhere to turn. I thought, my God, that's the first person I ever heard that seemed to explain how I feel. I couldn't believe it. And I didn't tell him, I didn't want to encourage him. But what it did, it gave me a kind of a nagging respect for him. I thought, that guy is as goofy as I am, and he's doing good. There must be some way to do it. And the net result of that, I began doing things he told me a little less begrudgingly. Not because I thought AA would work, not because I thought this crap would work, but I wanted him to like me. That's all. And I did things to please him. And it's the funny thing about AA, great miracle of AA, is that AA's actions don't care why you take them. You take them for the rottenest reasons in the world, as long as you take them. You start to get a little better. And I started to get a little better, and he wasn't nice to me. I said, Bob, I'm living in this abandoned car. I mean, old clothes. I'm an insensitive, intelligent person, and I'm living like an animal, Bob. I mean, it's not colorful or fun, it's just dreadful. What can I do? He said, get a job. I said, get a job, for Christ's sake. Look how terrible I look. He said, get a terrible job. I followed that direction. I became a busboy and a dishwasher, a lot of things. I got fired all the time for my mouth. But a guy let me sleep in his basement, and his wife made me leave a while later because I put out a few cigarettes in the rug. I was tired, and the ashtray was over there, and I wasn't, that's all. And I went back to somebody else let me sleep in their sofa. And eventually I stayed sober somehow. And by the time I was a year sober, I finally held a job as a dishwasher, working in back room of an advertising agency, wrapping packages. And I had a little apartment, one room and a half on Hollywood. And when I was 2 years sober, I finally got a little job as a writer. Somebody gave me a chance in this medical corporation. I still didn't have any front teeth. I wanted to go there and make an impression, so I'd saved a few bucks aside. I said, Bob, I put some money aside. I'm going to get some front teeth, and I'm going to crack this job. He said, you putting money aside? Sell it to your kids in Dallas. I said, Jesus, Bob, they all got front teeth. I don't. He says, they got a crappy father. Just send them the money. I learned to carry my lip like this. Nobody knew I didn't have front teeth. They thought I'd been burned in a fire. But I went to work every day. He insisted I go to work every day. He was a fanatic on that. He gets crazed. And there's a lot of problems on that job. And I went to AA every night. And with my sponsor, I was learning in AA. In those years I worked there, I learned some of the greatest spiritual lessons in my life. I wish I'd learned them when I was 10 years old or 5 years old. I learned them on that job. I was an older guy. If you do, you may wonder, what are the great spiritual lessons? Prayer and meditation? Yeah, they are. But I'm going to tell you some others that wouldn't catch your attention. Do what you said you would do. Be where you said, when you said you would be there. Don't take out your hostility on people who can't answer back. Children, waiters and waitresses, employees. On days you know you're having a bad day, watch that mouth, because you can cut up relationships and never even know what happened. And dumb little things like, if you see something that's broken and you know how to fix it, fix it. If you're going down there pushing a grocery cart and there's some food cans laying on the floor where somebody left them, stop it and put them back in. Stupid things. Waiting in line in that Los Angeles traffic. Once in a while, let somebody who doesn't deserve to cut in ahead of you. I didn't learn those lessons really well, but I learned them well enough to become director of advertising by the time I was 5 years sober, and I had front teeth then. If you're new tonight and you're missing some teeth, let me give you some hope. Once you become spiritually pure, they grow back. Probably never happened to you. When I was 7 years sober, another guy and I were brought to Hollywood, someplace called Cage Shane. We created something called Boss Radio. Became the #1 hard rock station in the world. We all wore shiny suits and said things like, "What's coming on down, baby?" Get a little sick of that after a while. When I was 10 years sober, I was downtown doing public relations for a big oil company. 15 years sober, I was a marketing director in Beverly Hills. When I was 5 years sober, the same wife and all those children heard the crinkle of green in my wallet, all the way to a post office box in Dallas, leaped out of their post office box, fled to my side, attached themselves to me like a group of starving chiggers. 9 months and 10 seconds later, another Catholic hit the street. Thank God somebody got me a metronome and a book on the rhythm system. That's ended that, you know. And my kids are all grown up now. 3 of my daughters are turning 13 this year in AA. And the other kids aren't alcoholics, so they're not. That last kid's a little boy, I'm glad to say. And my oldest, only one of my kids has turned out badly, and I hate to even talk about that in AA. But 2 weeks ago, she was elected a judge. I so hoped for a public defender, but no. A few years ago, she came home for Christmas. You know, Daddy, when we were little girls, you used to send us to our room. I said, sure, honey. She said, when you come to Albuquerque, I'm going to send you to a little room. I've no need to go to Albuquerque. But isn't that a nice story? And now I live out in the west side of town near the ocean with my wife of 53 years or something like that. She knows this is her last chance. And if you're new tonight, isn't that a wonderful story? I used to be down and out, and I came here, and now I'm just doing wonderfully. And it's all true, but I want to just take 5 minutes. This kind of introduction to a 5-minute talk on it, because something was, I hate to say it again, but Lewis was talking about it again today. Same thing, I had the same experience, but there's a different approach, but the same thing. If you're new tonight, you might think to yourself after a while, when did this old fool ever become an alcoholic? He wasn't an alcoholic when he drank. He wasn't an alcoholic when he got sober. When did he become an alcoholic? And I'll tell you how that happened. because I really knew I wasn't. I wasn't trying to kid anybody. When I was about 3 months sober, maybe a little more, I was feeling good one day. I'd lost a job, but I had another job starting the next day, and I had a place to go and stay on the weekend. And I was back in this abandoned car temporarily just for a day or two, but things were getting a little bit better. And I went to the noon meeting in the club. I was feeling pretty good. And I like noon meetings during the week because you don't find any of the people that are talking about their jobs and all that crap. You just find philosophers and people who understand. Nothing like going to a club at noon during the week. And they were talking about the first step of all dreary things. I had a wave of feeling good, and I thought, just once I'm going to be honest. I envy you people, I thought. I wish I could admit I was an alcoholic, but my problem is not alcohol. Like that thing in the very book said, grave emotional problems. Because I know that if I could take that first step and admit I was an alcoholic, I know that I watched people do this for years. They do the other steps, and things get better. But I'm not an alcoholic, so I don't know which of those steps apply to me, which ones are right. Some may not. I don't know what the hell. But I know one thing, I envy you. I wish I could say I was an alcoholic. And about 10 seconds after the meeting, somebody snitched me out to my sponsor again. Here's what he said now, Bob. And for the next few days, Bob and John Sullivan, the manager of the club, gave me a seminar, which I'm going to try to condense into 3 or 4 minutes here, maybe. And it went just kind of like this. He said, well, can't admit you're an alcoholic in the first step. Is that right, kid? That's right, Bob. I told you that. I'm not trying to be cute with you. I've told you the same thing. I'm trying to be honest. He said, why the first step does it say you're an alcoholic? Well, it doesn't actually say so. But we know what they mean. You know, don't kid me, Bob. He said, why don't you just try the black parts of the page for a while? And we admitted we were powerless over alcohol. Do you think you're powerless over alcohol? Not really. He said, what do you think is powerless? I said, you hear these guys talk in meetings, they get drunk and they rape nuns and go to Bangkok and hold up banks. I mean, bizarre. I'm not that way, Bob. I'm a nice guy who's been screwed around a lot. I'm a victim. He said, I don't think that's what it means, kid. It means this. He says that in every generation, there seems to be a small percentage of drinkers who get an unnatural reaction to alcohol. What do you think that unnatural reaction is? Makes them get drunk and do crazy things, I guess. The state runs on. No, he said, I don't think that at all. It means something entirely different. It turns out that every generation, a small percentage of people, the unusual reaction to alcohol they get is not what it does to them at all, just the opposite. It has to do something special for them. It must almost instantly change their perception of reality. After 2 or 3 or 4 drinks, things look different, and their relationship to their surroundings change. I know that feeling, but I haven't done all those crazy things. It doesn't mean you do the crazy things. It means your perceptions change. You may have 2 or 3 or 4 drinks, go home, go to bed. You may have 2 or 3 or 4 drinks, go to Mexico. You may have 2 or 3 or 4 drinks, fall in love with an 89-year-old woman on a walker. Something's going to happen, that's all. I yell, Bob, but I'm not crazy like that. He said, the point is this, kid. It doesn't, I don't know how to make you understand this. He said, the problem is, if it does that for you, you come to eventually learn that you don't know where it's going. Every time to drink, when you begin to drink, it's a game of Russian roulette. And when you're young, strong, you get away with it a lot of times. Boy, I'll tell 3 o'clock this morning, got drunk, Jesus. Got it home, took a shower, went to work. Man, I held him off. Click. Ran to that woman last night. Jesus, she turned me away, but at least I thought I'd never get rid of her about 4 o'clock this morning. Got home, oh, wow. Click. Every once in a while, you hear a loaded chamber, you know. Got in that bar last night, this crazy bastard. We had to fight with him. Like one guy broke my glasses. I hit him with a bottle. It was just terrible. Oh, God, I went, boom. I'm staying out of that bar from now on. He said, but as you get older, some sinister force puts more and more shells in that baby. And you wind up like you, kid. Boom. Jesus. Boom. Jesus. Boom. Jesus. There's a click in here somewhere. Boom. Jesus. All you got to admit, kids, is you don't know what's going to happen when you start drinking. Just you don't know. Is that true? That's true, Bob. But that is not why my life is unmanageable. My life was unmanageable before I ever drank. I don't know how to explain that to anybody. Booze is not, it's a problem, but it's not the problem. I have the grave emotional problem, Bob. It isn't caused by drinking. He says, why don't you read what it says? We admitted we're powerless over alcohol, dash. In the English language, kid, I thought an award-winning writer like you would know that. It means end of thought, beginning of new thought. Now you have to also admit that your life is unmanageable. Do you think your life's unmanageable? Not really. He says, you're living in an abandoned car out here, for Christ's sake. He said, that isn't what it means. I'm just kidding you, kid. He said, out in Malibu, the richest man in America goes to about 3 or 4 meetings every week, and he can afford to buy chains of treatment centers and psychologists and psychiatrists and doctors and counselors by the score. And instead he sits in those meetings. Why do you think he does that? Beats the hell out of me, Bob. He says because that's the only thing that soothes his heart. I said, well, Jesus. I'll tell you something, kid. Everybody that's born, you grow up and there's conflicts and pain and problems and situations. And we have highs and lows. You go through things and you have to get through pain. You learn lessons and so on. What did you think about if you were able to find something that kept those problems at bay? That'd be great. He said, you found that. That's called alcohol. Alcohol changes your perception. And he said something that I've come to believe is true. He said, there's a school of thought that says when alcohol begins to work, your emotional growth slows down if it doesn't even stop. And I've thought about that many times since, because I looked at my adult life, adult brain, adult body, adult strength, always at the intermittent beck and call of childish emotions and not understanding why. Just Jesus. He said, now the great thing about alcohol is that when I drink, I can put those things aside. And some of them come back and some of them get buried in the muck, I guess. But eventually drinking, when you come to depend on it for your survival, it gets to be a problem, so you got to stop. Then when you stop, you discover a lot of this crap comes back. Now you face the conflicts and situations and feelings you can't cope with. You have no experience coping with. So eventually, you have to drink to ease them off. But you can't keep drinking, so you got to get sober. But then you can't stay sober because you got to drink. And you can't keep drinking because you got to get sober. So there's a name for that, kid. He said, the only smart thing you've said today, you said your problem was not alcohol, and you're right, it isn't. Your problem is something called alcoholism. That's what, Jesus, Bob, that's the same thing. Alcoholism, same. So no, it is tremendously different. An alcohol problem was overcome by stopping drinking and cleaning up your act. In this strange, dreadful, unchartable thing called alcoholism, this mind-consuming, bodily eroding thing, you'll discover sooner or later, and I guess you've discovered it already, that stopping drinking and cleaning up your act has no significant effect on your life other than to gradually make it so painful you can't stand it. And I said, Jesus, Bob, that's me. That's me. He says, there's a name for people like you. I said, what is it, Bob? He said, you're an alcoholic. And I remember saying, well, I'll be damned. I had gone from down the hill, from being a rather successful man to being a bum on Skid Row and losing everything because the definition of what I had didn't fit my definition of what an alcoholic was. And it's just, I guess I did something that, I believed it, what he told me. I did something that day that I didn't even know I was doing. I read it later in chapter 3. That day I conceded to my innermost self that I was an alcoholic. And the net result of that is this. From that day in early 1959 until tonight, I have never had a serious temptation to drink alcohol. Which sounds nice. Don't clap. Take up a love offering there. Help us stay on the air. And if you're new, you might think, isn't that wonderful, just a serious, wonderful days? Not at all. Not at all. My early years, some of them, because I was headstrong, emotional person. I had some real problems. A couple times in my early sobriety, I seriously contemplated suicide. I just couldn't find a way out. When I was 5 years sober, my wife and children came out there, and it was I'd never stayed sober with my family before, and all of a sudden gone from living in an apartment house and living pretty well to now a house full of people and dogs and cats and a wife telling me what to do and on and on. And it got so bad one night, I just jumped in my car and ran away. And I got as far as Indio, which is a long way out, on almost the border of Arizona. I suddenly thought, I can't do this. And I called up my sponsor, and he talked me back to come and see him. And eventually I got home about 4 in the morning, and I went to bed, and went to work the next morning. But I had a lot of problems over the years. Almost went bankrupt to 10 years because we had some severe health problems, and on and on. But I never really had a desire to drink. You know why? It wasn't I was afraid to lose my family. Sometimes that would have been a blessing at the time. It wasn't I was afraid to lose my job. None of these things. I knew that if I took one glass of beer, or one glass of wine, or one martini, or whatever, if I did that, sooner or later, tomorrow, next week, next month, 5 years from now, I'll find myself standing on the corner and there won't be a friendly direction. And that is more frightening to me than losing anything. When you lose, you stand there and you watch yourself drip out your own sleep and you can't do a damn thing about it and nobody cares. And so as a result of that, I've been very fortunate. I've often thought the greatest problem that I've ever seen in Alcoholics Anonymous is people not really believing they're truly an alcoholic. They are kind of, and they go to AA for a long time. But after a while, when you see old-timers slip, one of the things they start to believe, I'm not really an alcoholic. It wasn't that bad. I didn't hold up the banks and all these things. I'm just a situational drinker. And for me, and people like me, I have to keep that in my mind. There's not even question. Because I know that I cannot drink and predict my behavior, and without some kind of help, sobriety becomes untenable. So I'm an alcoholic. And the only known answer for it in the world today is Alcoholics Anonymous. Valium, as was said earlier today, Valium and all these various drugs, Prozac and all the various upper drugs may ease the pain off. But it seems to me the purpose of AA is not to get off alcohol. It is to learn to live in reality and to do the things that make that necessary. I sometimes hear people say things like, well, AA is all right for your drinking, but how about your emotional problems? I have been, as I say, in jail 32 times. I've been in the Wood, Wisconsin Veterans Hospital. I've been committed to the State Insane Asylum in Texas. I was there for a long time. I've been in several other hospitals. One in Beloit, Wisconsin. I was chained down one day. My wife came in, went upstairs, had a baby, and went home again. And I was still chained down. I think I can speak on behalf of those who are emotionally challenged. Speaking on behalf of those who are emotionally challenged, I'll tell you, AA is designed for that. It's not designed for your drinking. Toilets get you off drinking. It's designed to make sobriety, to do very, very slowly what alcohol does fast, to little by little alter my perception of reality. This is truly a disease of perception, if there ever was one. And in taking care of it, you make things get better. The last thing I want to say before I sit down is that not yesterday morning, because I was on the airplane at 5 in the morning, some hideous time, that stinking Delta where they don't serve breakfast anymore. Oh no, never mind that. I'm all right. I'll be okay. Went through Dallas where I thought I might still be hot. But Thursday morning and Monday morning, I'm going to go to work, and I'm going to do something none of you do, I'm sure. I'm going to step over the bodies of dying men and women to get to my office, dying from alcoholism and drug addiction on the sidewalk. Because I was 15 years sober in some hideous fit of misjudgment. I left a job in Beverly Hills, and for the last 28 years I run the mission on Skid Row that threw me out in 1958. People say, why would you do that? And I say, I don't know. For such a significant decrease in salary, I thought it was spiritual. But when I go home at night and I step over these bodies, and I have come to believe, much to my surprise in AA, a lot of things I've come to believe, as a result of doing these things. Once I knew I was an alcoholic, I allowed my sponsor to force me to do these damn things. And I took an inventory, something I swore I'd never do. That's childish. and made amends. My number was amends to my father, man, I hated it. And all sorts of dumb things, but little by little, I stayed the same, but the rest of the world gradually shaped up around me. That's why I keep going to meetings now. I don't need them, but they need them. When I don't go to meetings, they go to hell again. Come on. But sometimes people wonder if you say, I believe that God loves me, no more than you, no less than you. I think if God exists, he loves me. He's not trying to punish me. He wants good for me, and I stand in the way. But then people say to me, if God loves you and loves these people on the street, why are they dying on the street and you're walking in there and getting out of your Buick Riviera and going in there and going home and living out by the ocean and having things going your way? Where does God love for them? I got to believe it's the same thing. The primary difference, you can give sociological reasons, psychoeconomic reasons, all sorts of reasons, but the number one reason that guy or that girl is dying on that street, because they decline to take actions they don't agree with. That's all. It's that simple. You want to do something? No, I don't do that. And that's why you and I have to get together and reinforce one another to remind ourselves it's okay to take these actions. And you can't get too blasé, and you can't get too slick, and you can't get too weary of it. You try to, as my second sponsor, my first sponsor, forgot these things and died drunk, and I got another sponsor named Chuck Chamberlain, who was a very active man, and he pulled me along. But he always used to say, uncover, discover, discard, but keep doing it and take the actions. When I was transferred from the psychiatric ward to the AA ward in the Texas nut house, that's how I got out of there by pretending to be an alcoholic. I had just come off a lot of shock treatments, electric shock treatments, because they're going to hep me. I should go hep somebody else for a while, Jesus. And I'd never been to a meeting in that area before. And I don't know if you've been there. In some areas of the South, they do it a little differently than we do it here. I mean, here we say, my name is Fred, and I'm an alcoholic. We say, hi, Fred. There I just coming off shock treatments over this ward, and this guy was saying, my name is Les, and I'm an alcoholic. And through the grace of God and the power of this simple program, it's not been necessary for me to drink any alcohol or take any mind-sedating or tranquilizing medications since my sobriety date. And for this, I'm truly grateful. And they all said, hi, Les. And that might be all right for most people. You're just coming off shock treatment. And I thought to myself, if I ever get to be a position of importance or power, and I stand a bunch of people, I won't give them some song and dance like that. I'll tell them the truth anyway. And I've come here tonight at tremendous expense and no little inconvenience to tell you the truth. I told you that I discovered I was an alcoholic after I was sober a while. So I can say this to you. My name is Clancey I, and I'm an alcoholic. And through the grace of God and the power of this simple program, it has not been necessary for me to drink any alcohol or take any mind-sedating and tranquilizing medications since October the 31st, 1958, and for this I am truly grateful.